The Asphalt Art program is administered by FC Moves, the Transportation Planning Department of the City of Fort Collins. The Paint Pot program is a grant-funded asphalt art project made possible through a grant from the National Association of City Transportation Officials. With special thanks to Bike Fort Collins and Jillian Betterly for programmatic support. This storytelling project is a collection of voices from the neighborhoods where the asphalt murals were painted. Several of the voices are Indigenous, Hispanic, and Latino community members with long generational ties to the neighborhoods called Tres Colonias, or the Spanish colonies. This episode features Debra Bueno from Buckingham during the installation of the mural on Romero Street, Somos Fort Collins, by Luis Santa Cruz.
My name is Debra Faye Bueno. I was born in Fort Collins, Colorado. My birth date is February 8th, 1954. I've been a resident of Fort Collins my entire life. I grew up basically on Pine and Willow Street. There was several houses that were there. The dump was on the back side of us. At that time, the city dump at Fort Collins. And so my mom was born in Buckingham. And so I have family and friends in neighborhoods when people I lived in Buckingham for a few years of my early life. And then we moved over to Pine Street. But people who lived on Pine Street, we went to Remington Elementary, and then they closed Remington. They sent us to Laurel, the old Laurel, which is now Centennial. And then in junior high, I went to Lincoln. And in high school, we went back to Fort Collins. So my people who actually grew up in that neighborhood could hang with the Cherry Street people, could hang with Buckingham, Alta Vista. I mean, we had no set boundaries because a lot of times they say, oh, you go to school over there with those guys. So it was always fun because we belonged to everything, right? And we had the best of all worlds. I think it was economic status at certain points. I remember when Buckingham got paved. I remember when they brought water into Buckingham. I remember my grandpa having the first indoor shower, and he opened it up and the neighborhood all came and took showers at my grandpa's house. He was one of the first people to get TV. So his TV was open to people, and my grandpa would cut up watermelon. And so, I've seen the neighborhoods. I mean, if you look, the subdivision San Cristo, it has sidewalks. We don't. Andersonville does not. It doesn't have storm drainage. That's one of the issues with the mural being washed away. There was no place for that water to go. So I think those are things, the inequities, and the kids that grew up on Cherry Street had all those things. They had street lights. It took a while for us to get street lights. Buckingham Park it was a field with its merry-go-round. And now as soon as they fixed the park, they started leasing it out to soccer teams and baseball teams from around the city, which took away from the neighborhood uses of the park. And now, the homeless hang out there. My son went recently to play with his son up at the Ball Diamond, and there were so many homeless people there that he said we had to leave, which is a shame, because that's another whole issue. They don't want the homeless somewhere else, but they don't care if they're hanging out in Buckingham Park. That's my worry about Sugar Beet Park. I've been there. I've seen people hanging out already. And I think the city has so long ignored us, and now they're ignoring the homeless. So these neighborhoods they've come a long way, but it's taken generations for it to get to this point. So I think the economic inequities, but living down here was wonderful. I look at Buckingham and I think, when I grew up, we had the German families still there. And so, we didn't notice anything different. We'd share our food, we'd do things, there was a common respect. What happened to that? I don't know. But, some of the families that lived down there from way back when, I'm still really good friends with them. We grew up together. You don't turn a lifetime friend away. And so, but there are issues that, I don't want to, I don't know. I think when the city done a report a while back, they done some kind of talking about when the Germans were there and when the Mexican migrant workers came in, that they destroyed the neighborhood, which wasn't true, but nonetheless, it made, again, feel that substandard. I said, here's the city of Fort Collins, and people are going to say, well, they done some research. They know this is true. And I was so appalled that that was in there because it was a neighborhood that was overlooked. All the people who lived down there were overlooked. And it wasn't that the Mexicans made it worse. No, they just happened to come in and were brought in by this government and were moved in to different places. And, a lot of the families, the old families here, came from New Mexico. My grandparents were from New Mexico. On my grandpa's side, they went all the way back to the land grant. But he wasn't an owner of a grant. He came as a worker to the grant owner from Spain. That's how far back those, that families have come from. And so there's a rich heritage there that kind of got overlooked. My grandpa came home from work one day, and my uncles were standing against the fence at the school, and they came home and he said, why were you standing against the fence? And they go, oh, Daddy, because we took burritos to school. And they said, we don't eat that kind of food in our school. So they punished him by standing him against the fence. Came back, so my grandpa said, okay. My grandpa went and bought a big old loaf of bologna. My grandpa always had a loaf of bologna, B-loaf, we called it, and he would have a loaf in there because he said, okay, they're going to make fun of you for eating this. You won't eat that at school. So then they came back, and he saw the boy standing at the fence again. And he said, why were you at the fence today? And he said, Daddy, because we spoke Spanish today in school. And they said, you don't speak that language in our schools. So my grandpa made a rule in his house that from that day forward, no Spanish was spoken in his home. If they were going to succeed in life, you had to not speak that language. My grandma spoke Spanish all the time, but then it became my mom's job to translate in English to her younger brothers and sisters. And so the language got taken away from us. When my mom went to school, her name was Antonia Socora. They said, we don't have Antonias in our school. Your name is now Jenny Cora Baca. So here's an institution that has taken away your family name because you weren't good enough. Your food wasn't good enough. And neither was your language. So a lot of the people who grew up here, excuse me, it bothers me. Sorry. So a lot of people that grew up here turned away from not being able to speak Spanish. And then they were ridiculed because the next wave that came through were migrants from Texas. And they spoke perfect Spanish. And they said, well, why don't you guys speak Spanish? And they said, well, because we were told we were punished for speaking that language. My mom was very light-complected. She had platinum blonde hair, very light-complected. And she could go shopping for all the families in the neighborhood because they would have the no Mexicans or dogs allowed signs. So my mom could go shop, which made her feel really bad. So she dyed her hair. She wanted to fit back where she belonged. And so that was the whole dynamic. And I used to tell my mom, Mom, what did that do to you? She goes, it didn't change anything because my skin color was still light enough. The changing my hair to brown didn't do much. And she goes, but it made me fit in for just a little bit longer into where I wanted to feel that I belonged. So I think that's the people who grew up here had a common bond. They knew that they couldn't go certain places. I mean, heck, Holy Family Church was built because people who went to St. Joseph's bought that church for them, so the Mexicans wouldn't go to church with the white people. So what do? Religion, everything is saying you don't belong. So we belonged to families, to areas. And so those things, were wonderful because you didn't have to be treated differently for anything because you felt safe in your neighborhoods. I still felt safe. We moved away from Pine Street. We moved out by City Park. We lived there for 12 years. Never felt home there. Never felt at home. Then the opportunity came to buy a house down here. Me, my mom, and my dad said, let's go back. And so we came back, and this is where we live. And this is where I'm happy and I'm comfortable. My neighbors still watch out for me. I still watch, the neighbor would come by and say, hey, somebody was hanging around your house, or I got your packages, or, here's some food. I mean, how many times do, we still share food. We do all those things. We take care of each other still. So that's one of the biggest pluses living in this neighborhood. The families who have known families forever. And, those bonds are still very, very strong in this community. So I think that's one of the best things that I feel comfortable about. This bypass is interesting. It's been promised for generations, something to do with the railroad track. I feel bad for the people who live over in the last street. But, only time will tell to see how well that works. Because I was told at one time the street was going to be closed at the end of Alta Vista. And now I see that they're going to continue because they're building homes so that their cars are going to, there's I can get out. I don't have to wait 20 minutes to get out of my neighborhood anymore with the train and traffic. But it's going to be interesting because a lot of promises to these communities have been broken. And they wonder why the community doesn't always respond positive to their ideas or whatever. It's because how many times, not only city, but the school board, I remember just spending time and time again trying to get Hispanic teachers being hired. My dad would be on committees and we'd go to the board meetings and they promised and promised. And then finally, they finally started hiring because it was nothing better than walking into a room and finding somebody who looks like you or seeing a teacher who's came from the same background you did. And so those are all positive things, but it took so long for us to get to that area. And it's so easy. I know a big criticism right now of the city is the hiring practices. What is the amount of people that are hired? Minorities, and I'm not talking women. I hate when they mix women in with, I'm a woman. Yes, I understand the need to hire women, but if you hire a woman and you need somebody who's black or Hispanic and you say, oh, we hired a minority. Well, yes, okay. But you're taking a job from somebody who I feel that this city needs to be more attuned to hiring and making that. Because at one point the city was real good, I thought, with diversity. I can't say the same anymore, but I don't work for them anymore, so I could say that. Oh, look, there's a hawk. Good luck. Oh, sorry. No, hawks bring good vibes, good messages, spirits, good spirits. So maybe I'm saying so okay. I don't know. But anyway, that's my native side of me. That's my grandma was India. So she was Apache. So we had that on our side too. In the 60s and 70s, I was really involved with everything. My dad was involved. We'd done everything. So that learning to step up and speak your mind was instilled in me. And so that's a part of who I am. My son didn't have to experience. I mean, I heard my mama's stories. I heard my grandpa's stories. I knew those stories of discrimination. And my grandson says, but Nana, it's not really that way. And I said, you don't think so? You've never felt really awkward in a position? You've been somewhere? And he goes, yeah. He goes, but that's part of life. I go, is it? Or is it a bigger picture? I go, that's for you to decide, because I'm not standing next to you. But when I'm telling you that things continue to happen to a lot of people, you've got to understand that and take that to heart. And your daddy has to, your dad has to make sure that you understand what he went through. Even at his, as much as I tried for him not to experience things in life, he did. One time we were up in Steamboat, and he was swimming in the pool, and we had taken one of our friends with him, and an elderly couple came up and said, oh, we didn't know they let the help swim in the pool. And he came up and told me, and I said, well, did you say something? He goes, well, no. He goes, I didn't want to be disrespectful. I go, there is a time for disrespect. They were disrespecting you. They were telling you were the wrong color to be swimming in that pool. So I go, there are times that even today you have, and I'll tell my grandkids, you have to be able to stand up someday for who you are. You may not be the most comfortable thing in the world, but it is our responsibility to make sure that those doors stay open to us, that we are still hired in positions, that education is the key. We have to go to school, you go to college. I don't care if you go to college, but you become you learn what you can. Even if you do a trade, you continue learning, never stops because you finish school. Learning happens every day. And the only way you're going to be able to do things is to continue that educational process. So that's where I see my family. I think my family will be okay. They'll say one day, oh yeah, Deb was right. Look at Deb. But I mean, it took a lot of learning for me to get to this point, so I can't talk for my brothers and sisters are all pretty much on the same plate. My brother Frank was in the military, but he also, he's buried at Wounded Knee because when the government seized Wounded Knee, he snuck medicine in. And he got surrounded when the tanks, so he was caught inside Wounded Knee. He was taking medical supplies in, and he was there when the government seized. He came out of Wounded Knee. Angela Davis walked into Wounded Knee with the Mohawk Treaty, saying that anybody who was holding that treaty could not be questioned. And so when she walked out with him, because he was a teenager at the time, and she walked out with him, brought him back, and he went back to Denver. That's where they were headed to. So, yeah, he also fought for this country, but he also fought for what was wrong with this country. And so when he passed away, he was granted permission to have his ashes at Wounded Knee because he had stood with them. So that was a pretty interesting, piece of. He also was at the Chicano Moratorium in Los Angeles when Ruben Salazar got hit. He went with the Denver contingency. And when Corky Gonzalez got arrested, he was part of that thing. And they hid people, so we didn't know where he was for a while. We didn't have cell phones or... So, but he came back, and so he experienced that also. So families in the neighborhood, when the riot broke out, they grabbed people and took them into their homes and sat them there until they gave, because, it was crazy at that time. There were police everywhere. They were stopping everything. And so he was able to sit with the family and wait it out. And then they took him to a safe place in LA. So And then we got him back, and yeah. But the Angela Davis thing, she walked him out. And it was funny because when a lot of the guys went to trial, some of the people who were arrested, they would flash pictures of people asking if they knew him. If they knew him, and my brother's picture was flashed. Who is this? Because he was walking out with Angela Davis. I mean, so high profile. If he had walked out with somebody else, probably wouldn't have been a big deal, but he never got arrested for that at all. My daddy is my hero. He, for a man of his, his education, he said, education is important. I remember being at a dinner one time for Thanksgiving with my mom's side of the family, and I was telling him that I was going to go to college. And my uncle sat at the table and said, what do you need to go to college for? Women don't do that. All they're going to do is get married and have babies and clean the house. And my dad looked over at him and he said, maybe that's what you have the goals for your daughter. Those are not the goals for my daughters. My daughters can do whatever they want. And, he said, and it was interesting because my uncle didn't have girls until a lot longer. And his idea changed on what a woman should do. So, but I remember sitting there and my dad said, no, I don't put limitations on my girls. So my dad was always there, and he was involved, with CSU. When the students first came here, he would bring them to our home and he would feed them because, he didn't want to make sure that they had a sense of home while they were away at school. So he would bring the students to our home. They would bring guitars and sing, and there was a lot of those kind of things. And my dad wasn't afraid to stand up and say, hey, this is wrong, and we're going to fight for it. As a matter of fact, the Northside Asphalt Community Center he went to New York and sought funding to try and build the North Side. So there was a group of men. So he was involved with that. And fortunately, down the road, I got to work there, and which was a whole nother wonderful experience. Until they built the new North Side. The old North Side, they didn't care about. Anna Zari, the city councilman, she did. She used to come to our programs and say, I just hate that the guys look like an airport hangar. The walls used to, because we sat on the landfill. And I told him, I said, if you build closer to the road, you're not going to have these problems because the landfill was back here. There were homes up for up. They didn't listen to me. And we started sinking. Our floors used to float about this side. We used to duct tape the holes in the gym so snow would not come in. I know I have kids that come up to me and say, if I ever hit the lotto, Deb, I'm going to build the old North Side again. He goes, because that's where we would come and be a safe haven. That was when Fort Collins was going through a lot of the gang issues, and Northside became a sanctuary. If you were at Northside, you didn't have to be out doing what the gangs were doing. If they were going to be a big fight, they'd call me up and say, hey, Deb, can you open the building? He goes, we don't want to be out there. I'd go down 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night. We'd open up, do a pickup game of basketball. So those kids who didn't want to be involved in gang fights would go there. So that opened up to the summer basketball program. And it's probably one of the most successful programs that we ever did out of that building. But the city didn't understand the concept. We would have pickup. There was a young boy who used to come and stay with his grandma, from Florida. And when he'd show up, we'd say, oh, summer's happened. Florida's arrived. And, he would play pickup ball with anybody. He would play all night long. The older guys, when they got older, and we had an adult team. So those adult teams then became coaches for the younger guys. And the city didn't understand that concept of they wanted it signed and you had to play a team. And, so the summer basketball program that's now, it's called summer basketball. But like the kids are the people who went through the program back when I had it, they say, no, it's not summer basketball. It's just basketball in the summer. So, because it was a subculture. Everybody hung out. We used to have an older gentleman and lady who their grandson had played basketball on one of the teams. Well, he went away to college, and they would come down and just sit for years until they could no longer drive down the mountain. But they would just come because it was just the best thing to be around, to see everything that was going on. We had slam dunk contests. Who had the voting rights? Some people said, hey, I'm number one player. You need a flag for me up here. So it was great. And people who have moved away and were a part of that program, when they're coming back through, they'll stop with their kids, and they'll stop at the New North side. And the kids said, and this is the place? They said, no. They call me up and say, Deb, it's not the same. You can't feel soul when you walk in this building. And it became about money when you get something new, but when it was old, there was not the same value built into it. Jean Halberg, who became the director of recreation, she used to be a supervisor, and she hired me to do a Christmas craft project program. And I went in, I'd done that. It was going to be just for a 1 week thing. Well, one thing led to another. Then the county offered a program for, the county would pay you to work there. It was called CETA at the time. So I took a job there with CETA. An opening came up. I applied for that opening, got that job, moved up, and I moved up to the director. 35 years. So I done all aspects of that job. So, and then, the kids in the community, I didn't care where you came from, but once you walked through my doors, you were part of my family. You were part of my kids. It didn't matter. And I still feel that way. People who have worked under me or done things, and I think they still believe that I belong to, when they do things good, I get the calls. When they do things bad, I still get the calls, And, you had to, it was a wonderful experience. But the city didn't understand. A lot of times, I know I've done this wrong, but I would go to businesses and I'd say, hey, there's a dance class the recreation is offering. I want to hire the instructor, but my kids can't pay for them. So if you give me money, I'll pay the instructor, and my kids can take the class for free. Well, I got in trouble for that because they said it should be a city. You should be asking for donations for the city. I go, technically, I kind of am. When we first started, we didn't have the community buy-in. They were kind of skeptical. I went door to door in all the neighborhoods of the city, inviting people to come. The Anciano program, the senior program, that was really interesting because they would say, I'd say, I'm going to have a program. Would you like to go see a play, or would you like to go play bingo? Would you like to go do something? And they would tell me, oh, si Dios lo quiera. Well, I'll be there if God's willing. And you can't plan a program, God willing. You have to know how many people are going to show. And I would say, okay, well, I think God would send me here to talk to you. He wants you to come and see this program. And we used to have one gentleman who would come, and his wife would come, and he'd come and he'd look to see what we were doing. And he'd give her permission to do the craft or do something, Then he'd sit there and he'd check it out, and then he'd leave and he'd come back. And her growth, and I'd say, Mrs. Garcia, do you need to talk to... No, you don't need to know no more. So her growth was, just amazing. But what I learned from them was far more than whatever I done with them. We had a lady who was 96 years old, and she wanted to do everything with us, Doña Jovita. And one day we were coming back from Greeley, right? We had gone to see a play in Spanish in Greeley. And then she goes, Debbie. I said, yes. She goes, what did we do? I said, we went to see a place. She goes, did I like it? I said, yes. She goes, oh, thank goodness, because I don't remember what we did. I said, oh, yes, you really liked Doña Jovita. And she'd go, oh, okay, bueno. So, yeah, they raised enough money, the Anciano group, by selling burritos, menudo, whatever. They raised every cent, and we took 27 people to Mazatlan. A lot of them had never been to Mexico, never seen a beach. So we raised the money, and we took them down and had an incredible time. We had the people who were afraid to eat anything. And then that's when the dollar was going crazy in Mexico. I mean, I couldn't even keep a handle on it. By the hour, it was changing. And so they were afraid to buy. And then pretty soon, it's exhausting to take people on a trip and be in charge of people. And but it was wonderful. I mean, they got to do that. They raised money to go to New Mexico. We went down and saw the burning of Zorzoba, which is just happening in the fall again. We went down and they raised their own money. They made money and they took their own trips because we couldn't contract trips out like the other senior center did. So, yeah, and that's another interesting thing too. The Northside Senior Program came about because the senior program for the city used to be on the corner of Mountain and Remington. It used to be the old Coloradoan building, and then it went to the recreation center had it. And before that was the movie theater. But they went there to that program, and a lot of them were the workers in the fields, right? And there was a table where all the old farmers who owned the fields sat on that table, and they wouldn't let the ancianos sit there. So I said, no, they can't do that to you. They can't tell you can't sit. So we marched over there bright and early one day when the senior center opened, and we sat at their table. And they came in, and there was a major. That's our table. They don't deserve it. The workers have to sit over there. It was quite the experience. But then the ancianos sat there, and they ate their lunch, and then they left. But it was to make a point. So we had our own program at Northside for all these years because they never felt welcomed in the other centers. And now that COVID and everything happened, the ancianos aren't at Northside right now. And they call me all the time, or they see me no matter where I'm in, they say, Debbie, when are they going to let us come back? So I guess that's my next mission, to find out what's going to happen with the ancianos. Because, they told them they can't be there in the summer because they have kids programs there, which that doesn't sit so good to me. But anyway, so that's a fight for another day. So that goes to show you that there are things that need to be answered and changed. And somebody looking at these painting that's going on right here, it's saying, look, they value. My grandparents worked those fields. They value where we came from. The sugar beet monument across the street. Who would have thought that one day they would honor the fact that these people made the money for these to feed people, People don't always value the people who work the hardest. No matter who you are, there's going to be a gap for something. And I think what they have to do is take a step back and look at it with your heart. Not so much what your mind is telling you, but you got to look with your heart. You know when things are wrong. You know when something's just not kosher. And don't be afraid to take that step. Reach out and grab somebody to take it with you. There's a lot of people out there who's been through it, have experience. Reach out for some of those people. Listen to your elders. I mean, I learned so much by listening and my elders showing me the way. That's where you have to go. They have knowledge. They have vision as well. They've been through a lot. And I think one day each one of us will hold that same value to your children, to generations to come, saying, yeah, this is what I've done for a living. But as part of my making a living, I had these experiences. And I didn't like a lot of them. Or there were some things I went out there and I wish I had grabbed onto and I didn't. But I think that what you have to do is, to be open. Be open for anything. Well, I'm going to use a phrase that the city, it's called the Choice City. And I think you got to realize this may be the Choice City. I mean, I've stood here. I love Fort Collins. But you've got to make sure that Choice City is for every generation that walks the street. I mean, I don't know what, to me, I'll come and go. I'll be maybe a memory in an archive. But the fact that hopefully I touched somebody's life and made that difference in one person that can change it for somebody else. So I think you got to make those choices in life to make the world a better place for other people. And if I've done that to one person, then I feel that I've accomplished something.